Hello, I'm Llewellyn King for MECFS Alert. Today I bring you an extraordinary interview with an extraordinary lady. She is Colleen Steckel. She works when she can. She's been a patient for 29 years. When she can, she works with Meadvocacy. Her story is the story of this disease, the story of personal survival, of struggle, and of hope.
The overriding biggest issues I have are my immune system reactions and the neurological and the immune crash that happens when I overexert. So anytime I do more than a minimal amount of activity, I find myself basically incapacitated. Yeah.
Exertional collapse.
Yes.
And
Exertional collapse is.
how long are you incapacitated?
Well, I'm always ill. I'm never well. So I don't go like well crash. I'm like sick and then sicker. And it varies over the years. If I'm exposed to a viral or a bacterial, it can be anywhere from 10 days to months. If it's just straight up, I've overdone and my body's trying to recover from overdoing, it varies from like 2 to 4 days now. I have found quite a few things that help me offset that exertion intolerance, that crash. And antioxidants is a huge component in that. I've found charcoal has been helpful. Many of these things have charcoal, but it has to be done carefully. Just capsules, and it really is effective, but anybody who's on a medication has to be careful.
How many pills do you take?
I have to be very careful because it offsets medications.
Right.
So if you take it while you're taking a medication, it can undo the medication.
That's very interesting because I've not heard of charcoal. I've heard of many things that people take.
Really? No, I've found charcoal to be very, very good, but again, many people are on medications for heart or thyroid or whatever, and they have to check with their doctor as to how much they can tolerate that.
Meadvocacy is a small group.
Mm-hmm.
What is your goal? What is your mission?
Well, the mission is literally to educate and advocate for people who have myalgic encephalomyelitis. And our organization started around 2013. I came in shortly after it started and was kind of in the background just helping out. And as time went on, I became one of the committee members. The myalgic encephalomyelitis designation has had different meanings over the years. So originally it was Ramsey. He described what he saw in those patients. Then the Canadian consensus criteria came.
When was Ramsey?
I believe it was like 55?
Yeah, after the outbreak in England.
Yes.
At the Royal Free Hospital in London.
Yes.
Right. Please keep going.
Right. So, and then we had the Fukuda definition, which was very non-descriptive or not a very good description of the actual experience of ME. So then the Canadian consensus criteria came along, and about that time, the organization, along with CIFSAC, members on CIFSAC, started pushing for the adoption of the Canadian consensus criteria, because it's great for doing research on our patient population, because it's a very nice, a very accurate description, or a better description of the patient population. Well, after the Canadian consensus criteria, they got together and went, we need something a little bit better for the clinicians. And so they got together and created the international consensus criteria. So our organization focuses on the international consensus criteria.
Right.
So in doing that, we have posted on our website, which is www.meadvocacy.org.
We'll put it on the screen.
Thank you. We took the consensus, or the criteria, and we created an easy to read questionnaire, or so it's like check off boxes. And I've presented it to hundreds or lots of people in different groups, including people who have fibromyalgia, who say they crash, and they look at that and they go, oh, this is really better describes me than fibromyalgia. or a lot of people in the ME community didn't quite realize how in-depth or how interconnected all of their symptoms were until they looked at the consensus criteria, the international consensus criteria. So we call it MEICC, ME International Consensus Criteria.
I think it's very difficult to put boundaries around the disease, and yet it's necessary.
Right.
I, for example, knew a man at a television station who went through a year and longer believing he had ME, became quite active on all the websites, and it turned out he didn't have it at all. He was being poisoned by fillings in his teeth, which produced almost exactly all of the criteria. So the big problem remains, when do we get a biomarker?
Right, the biomarker's
When will
great.
we know who has the disease and who has something else?
Right, and so what we just learned is that the NIH in their study, 6 out of 19 don't have the disease. But they didn't know that till they got to the NIH, and the NIH found their rare diseases. One of them had Parkinson's. That should have been ruled out. So one of the beauties of the International Consensus Criteria is they created the International Consensus Primer. And that primer is available online.
There is some controversy, though, about the International Consensus.
Of course there is.
I'm
There's
not going to get
controversy
into
about
it.
every one of the criteria. And so
Right.
just to clarify, Meadvocacy recognizes that, but as a whole, the group of patients that we're representing are the most severe. So the International Consensus Criteria gives them the best opportunity to talk with their doctor one-on-one and have a meeting of the minds. We walk into a doctor's office and we tell them a symptom like, my leg won't stop twitching, or, you know, I'm paralyzed. I'm at time paralyzed. What is that? And they're like, I have no idea. The information I'm looking at on the CDC says nothing about paralysis. And we're like, but if you look at the IC primer, it explains how, you know, the ion transfer, you know, that it goes into the details of why we're having so many symptoms. Because the IC primer goes through a lot of the symptoms that we have, like low body temperature or inability to control our body temperature. So those are some very odd symptoms. And so to have that meeting of the minds with our doctor, they need to be on the same page
How do
we
you feel
are.
about exertional testing?
I've done it.
Put them on a treadmill.
I've done the
And
2-day.
then they collapse.
Well, not treadmill.
Or
That would be,
not on the treadmill,
Right.
but later, the post-exertion.
oh yeah, and I did.
Bicycle.
And do you feel that's an effective way of gauging the legitimacy of the diagnosis?
In the support group that I'm part of, and I started a support group because we had so many patients who had no real avenue for finding out, you know, just to talk to each other. What helped you? What didn't? We talk about the 2-day exercise test, and having done it, I only recommend it if they need it for disability purposes, because the risk of having it possibly permanently lowering their ability to function is just too high. It's a very dangerous test. But if you have to have it for disability, obviously if you don't have an income and you can't get on disability, it doesn't matter what disease you have. If you can't work, you can't work. And if you can't get any money coming in, then, you know, it's weighing the risk.
A secondary need seems to be to collate all of these treatments that help a bit or help some
Yes.
people some of the time,
Yes.
which can include Reduxin B, Ampligen, charcoal, ozone,
Antioxidants,
and,
all of the things. Yeah.
I think that one patient I know takes 19 pills a day.
Yeah, I'm probably at about that.
Yeah, all of which do something or guard against
Right,
something.
and in looking at the IC primer, it gives the doctors a really good basic understanding that helps them understand why we need vitamin E, why we need lots of vitamin C, all of the antioxidants, because they understand there's oxidative stress. That basic one-on-one understanding with our doctor could make a huge impact on all of the patients who walk into a doctor's office looking for some kind of help.
Do you feel that the research which was going on, which has ticked up substantially in the last 5 years, it's still very modest compared with other diseases, but
Yeah.
in its own terms, it's been quite revolutionary.
Right.
Do you feel that it is sufficiently coordinated? Sometimes it seems to me that some people are looking at the brain, some people are looking at the gut. Whether this is, whether they need to get out of their stovepipe worlds and talk to each other more.
Well, I'm grateful that they are talking to each other more, because we certainly saw it worse 20 years ago when, of course, we had the psych field was so dominant in the research in the disease and trying to explain all of our symptoms were anxiety.
Oh, the psychologists
Right.
and psychiatrists
Thank you.
who have tried
Yes.
for so long to make this a psychosomatic disease.
Exactly.
And not a somatic one.
Right.
But past
So they're doing
that,
better, yes.
yeah, past that, are they talking to each other sufficiently?
No. And part of that is that when I look at the immune dysfunction and the neurological changes, we're not just talking fog. We're talking true neurological changes in the brain that we now have the science for. And we're talking the cardiac changes. We don't talk about the cardiac stuff enough. I'm on a heart medication. There's no reason I should be on a heart medication if I was healthy. This is truly an ME response. It's the downstream effect of ME that I have heart issues. And a lot of people have cardiac issues. And they're seeing, and that's in the IC primer that talks about the cardiac involvement. So where are the cardiologists in the room? So no, I really don't think that they have that they've fully embraced the full depth of what this disease
Now
is.
you do things on the web trying to tell people what works. Have you been able to establish a sort of a clearinghouse of information?
Yeah, that's what my support group does.
I find this works or that works or something else. Sometimes something psychological, sometimes something physical, and sometimes quite possibly something placebo, but it works.
Right.
Sometimes placebos have an effect.
Yeah, I'm here representing MEadvocacy.org, which of course we really want to make sure people know we exist. A lot of people don't even know we exist, even though we've been around since about 2013. But the other part of it is that I run the support group, and on the support group, that is all we've done and it's public. The Facebook page is public, and in that page we have taken everybody's input and created cheat sheets. So we have cheat sheets for doctors. We have a basic for, this is what the guy coming out of the doctors, being trained should have had. This is the chapter that should have been in the book. It's the basic understanding of ME. And most of the information in that is ME as recognized in the ICC. So there is this broader MECFS that is what is seen on the CDC website. But they're talking like it's 2.5 to 4 million people. But they recognize that ME as described in the experts criteria is a much smaller group. So we're probably about a million. And we've had, patient researchers sit down and look through the criteria.
Lower than that too. But the thing is not how many there are. The thing is there are, and they're very
exactly, and they're not getting recognized. And so if they go to the CDC website, they're not finding that information because that information
is the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. How does that interface with National Institutes of Health, which is the primary government research arm?
Right. So you've got Health and Human Services, and right now there's a petition with thousands of signatures asking Health and Human Services to adopt the international consensus criteria so that that specific group of patients will actually get recognized. So in that, if they would do that, then the CDC would have a page that described that patient population better, and the NIH would have a better.
The NIH says they're not getting enough requests for
I've heard that
for research, and
but
the clinicians, and there's a small group that we all know their names, are getting older.
Yes.
We are not seeing young doctors coming in to this field, although interest has gone up, publicity has increased, Research has increased, and yet the intake of doctors has, if anything, declined.
Yeah, I talked to a I don't remember what specialist was, but she says, yeah, call these others because our waiting list is 2 years. So the waiting list to see a specialist in our field, whether it's somebody who really understands it neurologically or the immune system issues.
Is it because it's very expensive for the doctor to treat a patient, have to spend a lot of time with them?
I would think number one is that it's really difficult to make sure that we really have ME. So the time it takes, obviously if 6 out of 19 get to the NIH and they don't have this disease, it is really time consuming and takes a great deal of work to verify a diagnosis. Just fitting the ICC criteria doesn't make you have it.
Many diseases are misdiagnosed.
Yes.
Diagnosis is one of the permanent crises of medicine.
Definitely. And it comes back to, do doctors, they don't have time. Exactly, they don't have time.
How are we going to get the medical schools to teach about this disease? So we're going to have a new generation of clinicians committed to seeing patients.
Well, if the information was on the CDC website that specifically included some of the specifics of the immune dysfunction and the neurological changes in the cardiology issues, I think doctors would go, this is a real interesting combination of, and I can really have an impact here. But when they read that, it's exertion intolerance, that it's brain fog, and of course I have ME, so I definitely have brain fog, and the treatments listed are all behavior management. Doctors don't want to play behavior management. They want to be doctors. They want to really be having an effect. They want to be using treatments. When they're told there's no real treatments for this disease, all these patients need to do is pace, drink plenty of fluids, watch their diet. I don't think that's helping us get doctors involved. I think getting doctors involved is going to require making sure they understand, I'm not tired. Fatigue, it shouldn't even be in the lexicon. Fatigue is not my issue. My issue is that living life normally makes me very sick. Physically, it changes my brain, it affects my heart, and it definitely crashes my immune system. So something like doing this, I will end up, hopefully not, but I could very likely end up with viral issues and bacterial issues that I'm going to have to get treatments for. But we should be preventing those.
Have you yourself succeeded in interfacing with CDC?
No. As much as I've tried online. Now, back to Meadvocacy, the organization was approached about being part of putting information together, and we repeatedly asked, and anybody interested can look on our website, and I believe the blog is called Meadvocacy Opts Out of CDC Work Group, and we repeatedly asked, are we going to be able to bring to the table the Canadian consensus criteria, the international consensus criteria information, the immunology, the cardiology, and the neurological changes? And we were told, no, we would only be focusing on what the IOM had in it, which doesn't have that. So we're very
That's
sick,
the
and we're
Institute of Medicine.
Yes.
The large study.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. The large study, and Meadvocacy started because we were part of the huge outcry from the community that said, we don't need to spend $1 million. We have a criteria. We have the information that explains this disease. Why are we redescribing it?
On the whole, though, a lot of people feel that the IOM, in recognizing the disease as a disease, moved the whole issue forward.
In my opinion, as a very ill patient looking from the inside out, I disagree. I understand why people looking from the outside in see it that way, but in my mind, we went maybe we're talking football here. You're on the 1st-yard line. Of course, when they were telling us to do CBT, GET, and that, or putting us in psych wards, that's not even on the playing field. But I think the IOM maybe took us from the 1st-yard line to maybe the 5th-yard line. It didn't move us. It didn't move the patients when they walk into the doctor's office. It didn't change our treatments at all. It's
So
the exact same situation.
The community needs more doctors, better government understanding,
Yes.
greater understanding of what this disease is,
Yes.
and some kind of general access to information
Yes.
about treatments that help some people sometimes, which is better than helping no people
Yes.
at any time.
From an authoritative place. We have a ton of information like my support group or other groups or different organizations. But until the CDC posts on their website that this disease includes immunology, neurology, and cardiology issues, and not just the fatigue or the brain fog, the real stuff that we need real treatments for. Just coming back to the immune dysfunction, that means we're at high risk for cancer, and we're at high risk for having reactivated viruses. Those need treatments.
Well, obviously, if you're sick, you're open to all sorts of opportunistic
Yes.
infections.
Right.
Let's get,
Mhm.
so we can put it on the website, your contact information again.
Okay, www.meadvocacy.org.
And where are you headquartered? Where is it headquartered? Does it matter?
Online? No, it doesn't. And I should clarify, I am one of, right now, we've had different committee members over the years because people got sick. We had Tom Jarrett, he died. So we've had many people who have had a lot of experience with this disease. We've had guest bloggers like Marianne Spurgeon. I think most people in the community know her name. So right now the committee is the four of us. It's myself, Gabby Klein, Tracy Temple Smith, and Joni Comstock. But to clarify, ME Advocacy is a project of May12.org. And Joni Comstock and some others, that's the nonprofit.
How do you interface with the other advocacy groups?
Online.
But you do. There's communication.
Some, but not official communication. No, we're not sitting down and having meetings with them. To be very clear, the four of us are very ill. We barely, we have a very difficult time managing what we have going. But we work really hard to, when we put something out, it may take a while, and everybody who follows us knows that. But we try to get it right. And we very much are focused on the most severe patients.
Thank you very much, Colleen. You're very brave and very articulate.
Thank you
for coming on the broadcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It means a lot.
It's a pleasure.